and wait for that to kick on. And fantastic. Okay, so welcome everybody. It's February, mix it up. And today we are going to talk about audits and audit prep and favorite topics like that. And there's probably a little bit of irony involved that probably some people wanted to attend today but couldn't because they're doing audits. And so we'll record the session and put it out on YouTube, of course. But I am really very, very appreciative for our panel today, who I'll introduce in a few minutes. Just stepping up and coming on, not knowing what really we're going to talk about, and just throwing themselves out there to provide advice and their experience. And so, yeah, very appreciative of our panel. We'll get to that in a second. Let me run through a few items real quick and make sure that I'm doing this right, which I now am, I think. Good. So make sure everybody keeps up to date on everything that's going out there with the community. My gosh, it's a busy, busy spring. We've got DynamicsCon coming up mid-March, right? The week after that will be our next Mix It Up, and we're going to talk about business process improvement and how that can be supported by Business Central. So that'll be pretty interesting. Of course, we've got wave 1 of the 2021 release of Business Central coming out. We'll have some Microsoft events around that in early April. I don't have the information on that yet. And then we've got 2 more events, and I believe both of these are in April. One is the WWMSTUG, and I'll let you look up what all that means because I don't remember the acronym for that. It's covering the whole Microsoft stack, as you can see on the screen. And then there is another new event. It's called the Business Central Boot Camp. The dates on that picture are wrong. They are moving it to April, but I don't know the official dates yet. And that's run by the D365 Saturday group, Power Community Group. There's a couple different names associated with them. So links for you there, of course. And I want to make sure everybody is sharing their webcam if they're comfortable. Keep yourself on mute if you don't mind, unless you're asking a question, and we do encourage that, especially today. We really do want to have an interactive panel discussion, so be ready to unmute yourself for that. And I think, reminder, we'll do a survey at the end, of course, but I appreciate everybody coming today, and we're gonna do today's drink. And one of the suggestions off the survey at one point said, hey, let's do a non-alcoholic drink. And so today we're gonna do a non-alcoholic drink. And our long-standing bartender, Kim Congleton, was called away on client matters today. She would be much rather enjoying a drink with us, I'm sure, but I'm going to fill in for her and give this a shot. And you all can tell Kim what a good job she does after you see me try this. So we're going to do a mocktail. And I got to tell you, this one just struck me because of the color and how refreshing it sounds. I haven't made it yet, but I've got... Should have unwrapped this first. I've got freshly squeezed blood orange juice, and I think this recipe is for like 2 drinks, so I have like 4 ounces and change. You can see about that. Look at that color. We've got my honey and my vanilla extract in the glass already. Just to simplify that, I'm going to go ahead and put some ice in there. That's the ice and my orange juice. Oh, I'm not holding that up well enough. There we go. And, oh, there we go. All right, and while I'm giving this a good shake, many of you probably don't know that Carrie Peters is a master beekeeper. And so, Carrie, I thought you'd have a fun fact to share with us about honey, given we're using honey in our drink.
Yeah, fun fact about honey. The best fun fact I can think about honey is it never, ever spoils. You can keep honey forever. And so if you are ever in a survival situation, if you find honey, you'll have a food source forever.
That's awesome.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it might crystallize, but it's still edible and never spoils.
I learned something new. I'll see y'all later.
Your box is checked for the day, Belinda.
So Carrie, can you add on? Because I had heard the other day that if you want to tell if you have real honey versus imitation honey, if you put it like in a bowl and you add water to it, like the honey will take the form of a honeycomb if it's real, but if it's imitation, it won't. Do you know if that's true or not?
I have no idea, Christina.
Oh.
I've never heard that,
Oh,
but I'm totally going to go home and try that.
all right. Well, you'll have a good
Yeah.
source to know if it's true or not.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll let you know. I have never heard that in all my years of dealing with honey.
All right. Well, I'm curious to see what you find out.
Me too.
All right, so I kept forgetting to hold it up to the webcam so you could see what I was doing, but shook up the honey, the vanilla extract, the blood orange juice, got it over ice here. We've got a little Perrier lime going in there. There we go. And of course, you got to garnish it. So we got a half a slice of blood orange, and that's a pretty drink. Let's see that. Now let's see how this tastes. It's very light and refreshing, as you would imagine. The blood orange juice didn't have a lot of punch to it, and so this doesn't have a lot going on there. I would want to amp it up a little bit, but I like where we're going with this. So hopefully you get to enjoy that soon. And
Kim would have put a lime sparkling water label over a bottle of vodka and poured it in.
Tequila.
Tequila, yes.
Yeah, always tequila.
Not vodka?
do that. All right, so there's the
Not
drink.
gin?
Enjoy
Not
that.
that I
Hey,
touch gin.
let's get on to the good stuff. And like I said, I'm very, very appreciative of our panel today and taking time out to share their expertise and experience with us. Let's go around the room, just do quick introductions, and then I've got a series of questions that I'm going to pose to our panel that came up with beforehand. But again, let's make this very interactive. The panel can ask each other the questions. Everybody on can ask questions. Let's just have a discussion around audit, and I want to make sure everybody picks up at least a few good tips and ideas. Preparing for conducting your audit and getting through it safely and quickly. So, Christina, you're first. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure thing. My name is Christina Frank. I'm the controller for Klein Tool Service Company. We are located in Newton, Iowa, which is smack dab in the center of the state of Iowa, pretty much. So our business specializes in manufacturing custom metal cutting tools, and then we also act as a distributor for standard metal cutting tools as well. We try to be a one-stop shop for some of our customers. Our headquarters is based out of Newton, Iowa, but we do have branch offices in North Carolina, Texas, Indianapolis, and Illinois. So we're kind of spread out a little bit more throughout the country. But my role here is as the controller, and I really oversee the day-to-day financial operations of the company. And in my past years, I have been active with NAVA, so I'm excited to be back and see some of our peers here on the call.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. I had no idea you had all those locations. That's excellent. All right, April.
Hi, I'm April Humphrey, and I'm just down the road from Christina in Iowa City, Iowa. And I am the VP and controller for West Music Company. If it has to do with making music, we have our fingers in it. So whether it's the instruments you need to make music, lessons, repair, music therapy services, what most people know us for is our national and international business. All those annoying recorders that fourth graders have to learn how to play. We are the #1 supplier of those in the US. You're welcome, parents. But we do run a full gambit of all those types of instruments. We have 5 storefronts, retail storefronts in Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois, and then an online presence for mostly schools, and then 2 wholesale divisions.
So everybody has been touched or has touched something that you make at some point, no doubt.
So
Excellent.
April, I'm curious, are you physically located then off the Coralville Strip there?
Yep.
Is that where you're at? So
Yep, I'm down in the dungeon.
I used to live in the old abandoned apartment. I don't think it's there anymore, but you know where that nice big new apartment building is kind of behind you?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
There used to be like a little rundown apartment that was there,
Yeah,
and I used to
yeah.
live in that
The
building.
2-level one,
Yeah,
not the skyscraper. Yeah,
correct. Yep. I used to live in that building.
nice.
All right, that's the definition of a small world. Cliff, how are you?
Hey, Mark. Good, good. Thanks for having me. So I'm Cliff McDaniel. I'm the Director of Operations at John H. Carter Company. Our headquarters are in Louisiana, actually in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So if you ever want to come down to New Orleans, we're just about 50 miles north of New Orleans. No Mardi Gras this year, so COVID, so maybe not as fun, but still a fun place, good food, and normally warm weather, but we're going through this little winter like maybe all of you guys are experiencing. So, but I was the controller for John H. Carter for about 7.5 years, and I've been our director of operations for the last 7.5 years. I'm over our finance departments and all of our systems, our CRM, our ERP. So we went to NAV about 6 years ago, and now on Business Central. And so we sell instruments, but not musical instruments. We're in the oil and gas industry, so valves, actuators, pumps, you name it, all type of industrial parts. We're a distributor, but we're also a manufacturer, certain parts as well. And we have a large service arm that goes offshore to rigs and onshore into plants and things like that. But anyway, very familiar with audit. We just completed our audit and had a successful audit. So anyway, congrats on that. It's always a stressful time during audit and doing other things as well. So, but Mark, thanks for having us. So.
Hey, thank you very much for joining, and I'm sure we're all very happy to hear that it was successful and you're done, more importantly. So, fantastic. And Carrie Peters.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. In my career, I have been a controller for an eyeglass manufacturing company, a coffee roastery, a snack distribution company, and a publishing company. So I've worked as a controller for all 4 of those different companies and industries and learned lots of valuable lessons and very much got to enjoy the full audit schedule every single year of all of those different places. And that's really what got me started in the ERP world, working with NAV and eventually Business Central. Now I get to work with our clients all the time, helping them. And in fact, I actually talked with 3 of our clients today about audit questions. And have a delicious spreadsheet to bite into after our meeting today, so I can help somebody substantiate some stuff for their auditors. So it's something I've always done, and I like helping people figure out how to get their auditors out of their place as quickly as possible so they can get back to what they're doing on a regular basis.
I feel so bad for the auditors because that's all we ever talk about is just getting it done quickly, right? But
the auditors have a tough skin; they're used to it.
That's what they sign up for, yeah. So, hey, first question is just it's a softball to get the discussion started, and then we'll drill into some specifics. But basically, hey, Cliff, I'm going to pick on you first, since you're already done. But of course, anybody can chime in. Just describe your audit process. What's it like? How long does it take? Just some general comments that what you just went through.
Yeah, so typically, obviously, we get our audit schedule and requested items. So, trying to get our financials, closed, the books closed. So we try to do that. Takes about 2 weeks. Our year-end close is a little bit longer than our normal close, but middle of January, we pretty much get a trial balance. So we'll export that. We're trying to go the world of paperless. So now our auditors, everything is secured websites and FTP and encrypted. So we'll load all of our balance sheet items, with all of our recons, and we'll load those schedules with a lot of roll forward schedules. And so the biggest thing, honestly, is just getting that trial balance quickly. We do our interim audit back in October, so they'll do a lot of testing for internal controls and testing like payroll and inventory and sample items. So a lot of our heavy lifting is done, say in October timeframe. They come back and do a sample inventory audit on December 1, and then we hit the ground running kind of in February, and it takes them about 2 weeks to go through our audit. And now I'm talking about our financial audit. We're also an ESOP company, so employee stock ownership plan. So we're audited in June as well on that, as well as our 401k. But our financial statement audit is obviously very, very important. And I think the key is obviously having your subledgers balanced and having your schedules up front, and then providing all that information timely. I think the key is, I used to be an auditor, and back in the day, and actually got into the system world because I audited our client, and then they hired me, which a lot of times auditors, get hired for your clients. But anyway, all that being said, I only provide what the auditors ask for. I try to not provide more, but then they start asking a bunch of questions, things like that. But that's just a brief kind of view there.
I saw some head nods there. Interesting. Anybody else going through on our panel, going through doing an interim audit? That seems like a good call.
So we do our inventory audit quarterly. We break it up and we do a quarterly audit so that then they don't do full inventory observation at that same time that they're doing the financials. So they've agreed to break that up. We also do the same thing with our customer confirms. We do them quarterly, so it's broke up throughout the year and then not as much at the end.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
April,
the
Christina.
biggest thing.
Go ahead, Cliff.
The biggest advice is obviously they love to do cutoff tests, so making sure you accrue everything at year end. Carrie, a compliment to you. I guess my first NAVUG was maybe 7 years ago, and I thought she was just a whiz. She was like just.
She is.
Miss Nav. I'm like, who is this lady? And you were a controller back then. But those tips and tricks how to export and filter things was really good. But I think the key is making sure that you understand your vendors, definitely like legal fees and things like that. Business Central, which is great, will accrue everything like, your receipts and everything like that if you have inventory. So you don't have to worry about those. But your G&A items are sometimes the things that'll catch you. And you want to make sure there's nothing material that you did not accrue. And then they look very heavily on our ship not invoice reports and things like that, and make sure that we're recording revenue and expenses in the proper period. But Carrie used to explain like some tips and tricks how to export that pretty easy. And that was, I don't even know what version it was, but always make sure that you're recording your revenue and expenses in the proper period.
April, Christina, Carrie, other comments just around, the overall audit process for you?
So our process is a little different here. We don't have a full scale audit. We're only required to have a review just based on what our requirements are with the bank. So we do not have the full scale inventory observation, customer and vendor confirmations or any of that, thank goodness. But we do still have a fair amount of work papers that we have to pull out of NAV, and to tag on to Cliff's point about, making sure that your cutoff testing is good and getting your G&A invoices entered. One tip that we have is that we have a spreadsheet where we're keeping track of all of our monthly invoices so that we can make sure that we don't miss anything at the end of the year, because sometimes invoices get missed or lost or don't quite make it to accounts payable. But we have a spreadsheet where we're keeping track of that, so that way we know if we've received the invoice or haven't received the invoice. And that's been one thing that's helped us make sure we're getting things in the right period as well.
I guess one thing that I would add that I think is really important when you think about how you administer your audit is understanding the story of your accounts. So as a controller, ultimately, you're going to be called to explain variances of some type or another. So reconciling all of your balance sheet accounts, every single one, is absolutely critical. If you skip that, you will get burned. And then understanding the story of what's happened with variance in those accounts. We all should see regular trends with how things move between our accounts. And if there's something significantly different, you've got to be queued up and ready to tell that story. And if you study the variances, you'll know way before the audit exactly what's happening. And being able to have that story prepared and at the tip of your tongue when you're talking with your auditors, instead of always having to say, "That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'll be happy to get back to you on that," right? Is a much better answer for your auditors, and will certainly encourage them to move on to whatever the next topic is.
Yeah, Carrie, that's great advice. I mean, just having confidence and knowing your story, definitely get that confidence in the auditors. you mentioned, looking at, say, variances. I think the power of analytics is so key, like looking at your financials monthly, and not only monthly, looking at a 12-month snapshot of, say, your expenses. So we talked about missing like expenses like G&A. You can easily see that, oh, well, I usually have 10,000 in utilities and it's 0 in the month of December. Like, what happened? Well, if you see 20 in November, then you can explain it very easy. But if you don't, then you can easily kind of catch something. And like you said, I loved where you said, catch it before the auditors. Obviously, if you know everything before the auditors, boy, you build that confidence and you're good and you're not hiding anything. Now, I'm not saying go tell them everything, but you know the answer when they're ready to ask, So.
Correct. Yep.
And I'd like to add on, Carrie mentioned making sure you're reconciling all of your balance sheet accounts. One thing that I've always coached our team on is to make sure that you understand that a balance sheet recon is telling you what makes up the balance. It's not showing the transactions that are flowing in and out of the account. It's actually showing what makes up that balance, because that's where you can find out if you have issues or not. So that's one thing that I've really stressed with our team here.
Nice.
Critically important.
Yeah.
Well, and as part of
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
if I can jump in there, is to make sure that in those balance sheet recons, they're just not restating the transactions that make up the balance. That doesn't do anybody good. You got to be able to explain what the balance is. If it's $5,000 balance, don't just say, well, we put in an entry for $5,000. Well, why did you put in the entry? What does that mean?
Right. My question for my team members with that always is, Dave, with any balance account is what is the anticipated event that will relieve that balance? Because either it's going to sit there and it's going to sit there for a particular reason, or that at some point some other thing is going to come through there and clear that out. And understanding the flow of what's happening with that data often gets the team past that transactional viewpoint and toward the flow of how things move in and out of accounts.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Doing audit, it's been a long time ago, but obviously I think we take for granted, like if you're a good controller accountant, everybody reconciles their balance sheet accounts, right? And there used to be clients that I would just be happy if they did their cash account, right? And so, I mean, if you're balancing your main accounts, your payable, your subledger accounts, right? Your cash, your fixed assets, your payables, you'll catch the majority of stuff. But the ones that are out there, like these suspense accounts or payable accounts, you really should be balancing, like you said, every balance sheet account, because some people wait and balance those at year end, and that's where you're not prepared and you're having to do all this research and you have to delay your audit, which is a bad sign. So if you're doing that, I say at minimum quarterly, but I like to balance, our schedules every month. That's the best thing.
So I'm going to tell you something that saved me a lot of time this year, but I'm going to say it with a big old asterisk next to it. And this goes to what's a comment that Cliff said earlier is don't give them more than what they ask for. So you have to walk a very thin line with this one. But specifically this year, all of our analytics were off when we were looking at 2020 compared to past years, compared to our budget, compared to anything. It was just off. And so part of that because our sales were down, but also because we then cut expenses to be in line with that. And so there just wasn't a good comparative. So we started out our audit with a powwow of the audit team and told the story of our year. How did we go into the year? How did we adjust throughout the year? And what did we see and in terms of sales expenses, et cetera? Talked about the time when we were actually shut down so that they could very clearly answer some of those questions ahead of time, but when they were starting to see those. And so that goes to that confidence level as I was talking through those things and said, our installment receivables are going to be at 50% because schools weren't in session. There was no band and orchestra programs. Then as soon as they saw that in the numbers, they didn't need to come and ask me, why did they say it? They already knew. So it really did save us. But if you tell that story, make sure you are telling that story with only the details that they need to know and not too much, because it can cause them to dig further in places that they didn't necessarily need to. So it's a very thin line.
And it's not like when I make that comment, only share what you need to. That is a true statement. But the reality is that you don't want to do more work than you have to, right? We're all busy, and it's not like we're trying to hide something. It's just that you don't want to go and do another test or another sample or schedule and that kind of stuff, right?
It
But
adds
you're
on the
right.
dollars.
This year, I think we all had to give a little story because of COVID, right? And it was just a bad, well, for a lot of businesses, it was a bad year in 2020, right? And so I think the auditors came in knowing that, but then they would ask, well, why is your pressure management division up? And we would have that answer because it's safety regulated. You have to do this work, but our other divisions were down, right? So, so telling the story, I like the way you said that. So.
I love that tip. That is absolutely fantastic. And what was their reaction to that discussion, April? Did they seem appreciative?
You know, at the beginning, I'm not sure that they quite got it, but by the
Yeah.
time we got to the end of it, they had to completely reset this year. Everything I mean, we use the same audit company we've used for probably 20, 25 years. And so they just kind of follow the process they've always used. And so they knew what their variance was normally. And they're like, we would have asked you about every single account. Yes, you would have. So I think after the fact, it was like, okay, I understand why you're prefacing this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So, and we do, unfortunately, think I can say this, we're with RSM is who does our attestation, and we get newbies every single year. So even just the process explanation of what kind of business we're in is helpful to shorten that time frame. And yeah, I agree with Cliff. I'm not hiding anything. I just don't want them in my door. Every time they're in my building, it's costing me money. So get them out.
Yeah.
So April, you said RSM is your auditor. So who's your partner there? Are they out of the Iowa City office or Cedar Rapids?
So we have auditors out of both, but our main partner is Joe McCarriger.
Oh, yep. So I used to work for McGladrey. I never got to work on your account, but Jill sat right next to me when I first started.
I'm
So
glad you said
he wasn't-
got to and instead of had to.
Yes, nope. I was no, I did not get the opportunity to work on your account, even though it was right across the street from me. But anyway, I was just curious who your partner was now.
Yep.
So yep, glad to hear Joe's still there.
Yep.
So
I did.
Oh, go ahead, Cliff.
They did. I wanted to thank Lewis. There was a question on there to the panel. If I wanted to create Power BI reports that displays the permission each user has, can I find a table in BC that displays this information? I don't know if the panelists want to describe that. Obviously, internal control, segregation of duties is an important thing. Lewis did post the tables in the chat, so if anybody wants to see that, but just the panelists, like from you guys, if it's okay, Mark, like how do you handle your permission sets? And obviously the smaller company you are, the more that people are going to be doing multiple things. But we definitely have segregation of duties, but I'll shut up and just let the panelists, if that's okay, Mark, talk through that.
Absolutely. But I'm just going to go ahead and jump in with the answer. I've learned recently, you just set everybody to be a super user and let them have it. So that way everybody can do whatever they need.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Our auditors hate that I'm a super user and can do everything. They're like, only IT should do it. And but I am the BC guy. But that's
if you don't mind a qualified audit, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
I'm seeing how much I can say before Carrie fires.
So Mark, I actually had a client years ago. Everybody was a super user. The auditors came in and said, "Yeah, you can't have that." So they created, 6, 7 different roles that was equating to a job title, and all those permission groups basically were super users. They had the same permissions as the super group, and the auditor didn't say, "Yeah, this looks good."
You should have told them that you can because you do. They mean you shouldn't have everyone as a super user.
Right. But permissions has always been one of those dreaded things in NAV and BC, right? Because it's one of those things. It's super flexible, but with flexibility comes complexity, right? And I mean, I've been on projects where we literally had 5 guys running around on a production floor with walkie-talkies. Okay, user this one it's getting this permission error. Okay, somebody sitting in the back and change it. Okay, try and log out, log back in, try again. I mean, it's a pain. It really is.
Yeah, I think that your partner's experience with setting permissions can make a big difference as well. And then the approach with how you incorporate that into your project. I think, unfortunately, a lot of companies put it in place for go live instead of for testing. And that makes it especially painful. And I think I see a lot of people backing off of proper permissions because of that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so some of the new things that I've seen companies doing related to the permissions recorder have been interesting. I'm still on the fence about the true value of using the recorder for permissions because it can get quite complex and detailed, and users can miss things because they don't understand all of their processes. So I think it's got to be a good mix of a knowledgeable partner who understands the tables and what happens behind the scenes, as well as a little bit of detail work with the permissions recorder, especially when there are customizations or extensions that are involved. So it's not an easy equation, and oftentimes it's hard to explain to companies why it's not easy, why we can't just flip a couple of switches and give you the proper permissions.
No, absolutely. But it's also one of those things where it's generally it's at the end of the project, right? The budget has been spent, and
Right.
yeah, and customers don't want to spend another 2 or 3 weeks on fine tuning permissions.
Right. Right. Yeah. And someday I'll be able to properly explain, Henrik, the impact of having the user go in and accidentally change something important in your setup and how expensive that can be.
Or you mean uncheck the direct posting on a GL account?
Correct. Nice, easy one. Correct. Yep.
Some other thoughts around permissions and security relative to Cliff's point?
I mean, I do know that there is a page in Business Central where you can actually see the effective permissions of a user, right? So you can actually see, regardless, a combined view of this user can do this to this table. And it doesn't necessarily show you it's because he's a member of this, that, or the other group, but more in total, so to speak. And I will say I really like the new permission groups, I think they're called, where you can create, I guess, job title roles, right? Where which is then combined with some other different groups. So instead of now having to add 16 different permission sets to a user, you just add 1 or 2. And it's managed from a top level point. I really like that. I'm in the middle of an implementation where we're struggling with the permission. So it's a pain, but it's better than it was.
Yeah, permissions are not an easy thing. So we use easy security, but it's not always easy either. So, but Jonathan had a question: how does regular user versus super user play with Microsoft's emphasis on 2 multi-factor authentication? Are you guys, anybody on the panel, using 2-factor authentication today?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's again, when you are all on the in this case on the Microsoft world, right? It's just what you do, right? And once you log in, and the thing is, once it's logged in on your computer, right, that's linked to that, it doesn't pop up every time you go in, right? So just once in a while.
Got you. So, Mark, I had a question for April. She had made a comment earlier about she's had the same auditors for a long time, and we do too. I feel like that's a blessing. There are some publicly traded companies and other companies that require their auditors to be switched out every 3 to 5 years. Why do they do this? Because I guess you develop a relationship with your auditors and they know your company and they're a little bit easier. I guess I wouldn't tell my auditors that they're easy, but they probably are, as opposed to some other auditors that would come in brand new. While April talked on new auditors, you have what you call interns that come like from LSU here, and they're green, and they put them on the cash schedules and things like that, and we've got to explain, and it can be annoying. That, though, is nothing compared to getting a full new set of auditors. Does anyone or any of you guys on the panel or anybody else required to select new auditors or at least a new partner every so many years?
we were required to select a new partner every few years. I can't remember what the interval was, 3 or 5, somewhere in that range. And that was an interesting thing because you'd still have some of the history and we could still have carryover of the lead. So that's what we did with our particular switch during the time period I was here. We switched partners, but we kept the lead. And we asked for her to be a part of the team for at least 2 years continuously before they switched the lead. So we attempted to orchestrate the change over time so we could have some continuity and not lose a lot of history with some very specialized accounting practices with that particular company.
Yeah, unfortunately, that came about during the Enron days back 80s, 90s. I can't remember exactly when. And there was a lot of fraud found, collusion between the companies and the auditors. So that's where that came about. Sarbanes-Oxley came about the same time.
Yeah, it was 2000, 2001. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we experienced that, not with the company that I'm with now, but a company that I worked for before. We were a public company and we were required to switch out who our partners and auditors were every so many years. Where I'm at now, I'm with a private company, so we don't have those requirements, but we do get new leads about every other year, it seems like, but our partner has stayed the same.
I got you. Yeah, you talk about publicly traded companies. I was with one for a couple years in healthcare, and yeah, it's quarterly audits, and it's just not as fun. So I'm like, I don't know that I ever want to work in a publicly traded company again. Some people love it.
Yeah, I've yet to come up with a reason why that would be better, really. But stock options, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, only stocks. You got to get into Apple when it's at the beginning and get rich. I guess it's worth the headaches.
So there's quite a few comments earlier about preparing for the audit, things you can do before, things you can stretch out the work a little bit. Any other either activities or processes, anything else that you do to get ready for the audit, either right before the auditors get there or several months in advance?
You know, one thing that we do, and Mark, I appreciate you including me on the survey. I think you're, talking about digital, and just different things like that, right? While we don't digitize everything, we started to scan with Zetadocs a lot of our backup documentation, and it just makes our audit go a lot quicker. So when they pick a sample, we'll even show them. We don't even export. They just will look into our system, and we will point them in the right direction. They see the backup documentation, and our testing, we just fly through it. So if you are not scanning, whether it's Zetadocs or anything else, to underlying records like your receipts for inventory or your invoices, for payables, would encourage you to do it. It just makes testing go a lot faster. Does anyone else do that, like digital, like scanning all your docs and things like that? Seems like April's shaking her head.
Yeah, we digitize everything. That's actually one of my notes here, was that asking them ahead of time what they can view and cite as opposed to having to print or have copies of, because we too I'll spend one whole day with them at times going through processes, showing them what they need to see, instead of spending a day pulling it, them spending a day looking at all the stuff and coming back for another day to ask questions. So yeah, if you can do that, that speeds it up a lot too.
Yeah, I tell you, it really does speed. Back in the day, an audit, a long time ago, I don't know if y'all know a green bar, ledger paper, huge paper. So you would just want to print massive detailed trial balance and just throw it on the desk. Well, that way it took them so long, they could only do 5 tests and then the audit would be over, right? So that used to be a trick of the trade. Now everything is automated and we're going digital and paperless, So anyway, you can't really do those tricks anymore. So I say, hey, scan everything and speed up your audit. So.
Yeah, absolutely, Cliff. That's one of my principles with audit that I always work with our clients on and my team, that you never give the auditors anything that hasn't been pre-organized, right? So I think that in the past, a lot of people are like, give them those boxes of files and let them find it. With the amount of time that auditors spent, which therefore equates into your fees, it's absolutely not worth it. Having somebody pre-organize that and make sure that everything they've asked for is in the order that they asked for it, so they can literally flip through that stuff electronically, right? with digital records, and they don't have to waste any time trying to figure out if they're looking at the right thing. It's almost one of the more important things that your group can do to make sure that they're getting out of there quickly, because you hand it to them exactly in the order that they asked for it with only the detail they've asked for.
Yeah, and to expand on that, detail organization is great. My recommendation is you have one point of contact for the auditors as well, like your controller or assistant, whoever it is, because you don't want them going to ask questions and people get scared and they say the wrong. I mean, I've had at different companies, people give schedules and they just print a report out and it doesn't tie and it doesn't balance. And then you're answering a whole lot of questions. So make sure that somebody looks at it that understands what are they even trying to test. So, you can just save a lot of time. It's organized. So talking about I think it's all about confidence of your books, right? And so you want your auditors to know you're confident in it. So.
And I would agree with your comment about trying to have one point of contact if you can, because I think that helps them know who to talk to, but then it also helps you, be able to understand what questions they're asking. Because I know that I have learned over the years what questions they ask, and that helps me be prepared the next year too, because I know they're going to ask this question, so I'm going to have everything ready for it. Even though it's not a technical work paper that they put on their PVC list, I'm still going to have it ready, so when they ask me about it, I can explain it and speak intelligently as well, instead of fumbling around and not knowing what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't stress that more. I mean, I can't stop them from their fraud questionnaire and ask other people, but other than that, the PVC letter or any request should come through one person.
Yep. Being prepared in all those different ways we've talked about is a huge advantage too, when you can start to talk with your auditors about their fees. So I always like to take note of how well the audit was organized and how quickly they were able to move through things, especially in comparison to the last year. Because on that exit conversation with the auditors, I always like to talk about how we certainly spent, at least 2 or 3 days less this year than last year. So let's talk about renegotiating the fee down, because as long as you remain organized and prepared, then it is taking them less time. So it makes a very easy conversation for reducing your fee. The one exception to that is if you're ever changing your system, right? So if you're doing a re-implementation, or if you're moving from one other system, maybe you have some acquisitions, right, that are coming in, you're probably not going to make that argument. But otherwise, you absolutely can.
Yeah, you definitely should be a negotiator. Our auditors just seem like, it gives us more time to do more tests, and they come up with new tests. It's like, we got a new FASB standard or something, and they're going to figure out a way to spend that money, right? It's like,
it doesn't always work, but you can sure try every single year.
Are they making up FASB numbers at this point, or?
I think so. They're like,
that's a secret XX Team 10Q. Yes. Cliff, I took note when you were describing your audit process right up front about loading documents to the secure website and so forth. Did you have to print anything this year? Was it all paperless?
We're you can never say 100% paperless, but I would say the majority were paperless. So we just scan everything, all our schedules, everything, and we just take everything and automate as much as we can. There are some schedules that we will print out because they request those, but they're pretty much, though, why we went digital is they're going to take everything we give them, scan it themselves, and put it in their work paper. So, it's pretty awesome where you don't have to waste paper, right?
Well, that's pretty lucky, because the last auditors I had to deal with wouldn't even take paper. If you tried to hand them a piece of paper, they would say, "Can you go scan this and give it to us, either spreadsheet or PDF?" They wouldn't even take it off our hands.
Well, now with Corona, they don't want to touch anything, right? So,
right. Fantastic. We have a few minutes left, and I don't want to keep the panel any longer because need to, because of course they are busy as well as a lot of us. But I would like to go around and hear from everyone. Just kind of final thought on one, either something that you've found in BC that or NAV that has really helped you with the process, or two, what's another tip in terms of just getting through the audit a little bit faster and getting back to your regular jobs. April, we'll start with you.
All right. I'm going to say my biggest tip is do what you can throughout the year. Balance every month so that it's not all at the end of the year.
Yep, absolutely. Christina?
Yep, so I'll say April stole mine. But yes, we basically, since we kind of have an idea on what the work papers are, we are constantly working on them throughout the year. And so that way, when they do show up, or when the time comes, you know, I'm not spending 3 weeks trying to get audit work papers ready. I can pretty much get them knocked out within a couple days. You know, a couple reports, I guess, you know, within NAV, you know, the AP and AR aging have been very helpful, as well as inventory valuations, WIP valuations. But then also there's the top 10 customer and vendor lists. Those are helpful too, because those are all questions they ask about. And then, you know, Cliff has also talked about the ship not invoiced report, where there's a lot of scrutiny on that report as well. So that is one that we use frequently as well. And we just make sure that we have everything pulled together. So that way, when they start the review process, they look at what they need, and then they're out the door faster than we knew they were here. But this year, I guess I'm curious from those who have already gone through their audit, did your teams come on site this year? Because our team is working 100% remote.
Oh, yeah.
So I was just curious what others were experiencing as well.
Yeah, so I'll take that real quick. So, Christina, thank you for sharing what's in BC. You pretty much stole everything that I was going to say, but those are all good reports. Obviously, those are your account schedules and your financials. Take the power of what you already have in BC, you know, but to answer your question, our auditors did come on site. They normally come for 2 weeks. They only came on site for 1 week. They sent 3 instead of 5, and we just spread them out. They did wear masks, and they said they were going to wear gloves and masks, but they did come out, and it was fine. And so, but you know, we are starting to move more to the digital world. And so, like I explained earlier, they probably could work 100% remote, but it's just seeing your auditors and interacting with them makes it a little go quicker, you know. But my one advice that, you know, Christina talked about everything in Business Central, but it's like we've been saying, just be prepared. Make sure you reconcile, you balance all your subledgers and all your balance sheet accounts. You know, to me, the quicker you get your data to your auditors, the better you are. There's more confidence in your financials, as well as your audit will go a lot quicker. Know your PBC list. Like we mentioned earlier here today, if you've done the audit, you should know what to expect. Just be prepared and have all that ready. And then the last thing would be, as much as you can scan or have digital, you know, do that, and they'll like you. Your auditors will love you more for it. So that's pretty much it for me.
I wonder if audits go smoother or are harder when they're done remotely. Never thought about that.
I guess
there's no way to tell.
It depends on how good your audit is, right?
Yeah.
So,
I guess we'll find out this year.
Right.
It's certainly easier to hide from the auditors.
Carrie, any
you know,
other tips out of BC or tips to make the process go better?
Yeah, you know that I have to have a tip related to an account schedule. So one of my best tips related to audit is to use a lead schedule. So for those of you who haven't used an audit lead schedule, all it is a categorized trial balance that matches your financial statements, so that you can see line by line for your financial statements which accounts are listed on there. So you've got the detail at your fingertips. I would actually deliver that to my auditors along with the trial balance, so that they could tie very easily between those numbers. It helped to pre-answer a lot of questions. I wasn't giving them any more detail than what they already had in the trial balance. It was just in a slightly different format. And I would study that before my audit. I would look at it in comparison to the balances for the prior year. And I would look at the 12-month view to make sure that I understood my trends. I'd apply some percentage variances on there so that I could pre-anticipate what questions would come in those categories. So that account schedule saved me hours and hours and hours of time, and really raised my confidence level that I understood my books.
Excellent. All right. Any closing thoughts or questions for the panel?
And we were talking about financial audits, but regulatory audits are a little bit scarier, but you can handle them the same way. be prepared. You know, I think the regulatory audits back in the day, right? You put them in a hot room with not many lights. You try to get them out your door, right? But, I hate scare tactics, but our regular financial audits, you're normally nice to them, right? So anyway, just closing comments.
So
Yeah,
I guess
most people don't know that Cliff used to work for the CIA. So
so I guess one tip that I've and again, I'm not a financial expert by any means, or accountant by any means. I'm a developer, but one issue that I've seen many times during my career is people not being able to reconcile their OpenAR and OpenAP with the GL. And I always tell them it's easy to find. Go to your AR or AP GL account, filter entries on some that has that where batch name is not blank. That's your discrepancy. So just wanted to point that out. Go ahead.
That is a great point. Like direct posting, make sure you're careful how many accounts you're letting. Anything that's tied to a subledger, be careful if you're direct posting, because that's how you get out of balance, right?
Yeah.
Not having a subledger. So that's a great point.
And I'm actually right now building a little. It's going to be a free toolbox, and one of the things I'm going to do in that is actually loop through all the general posting setup. Customer posting group, vendor posting group, item posting groups, and loop through all of those, and all the accounts that are used in those, go mark them as or uncheck the direct posting allowed on those, because it's one of those things, people do it all the time, and I'm just getting no, and slap their fingers, and it is one of those. It's a field that I really feel should not be an editable field, and it should be a function, so you can set permissions on who can actually touch that field, and you should also be told, why are you doing this? I mean, you really have to have a good reason to do this, and the only good reason I see for having direct posting on those accounts is when you do your initial open balances. Anything after that, no, don't touch it. If you need to do adjustment for whatever reason, you create a separate account for your adjustments, and then you have a total account that you use.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, Henrik, I want to see every partner using that tool after they finish their data migration before they release people for go live. I think that'd be fantastic.
Right.
Yep. I'll send you an email once it's ready.
Please do.
Yeah. Nice. Fantastic. Well, again, April, Christina, Cliff, Carrie, thank you so very much. Wow. I can't wait to go back and listen to the recording and capture all these tips. So there's so many head nods going on here, and I think everybody got something incredibly valuable out of this. But in the heat of everything else going on, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing like this. Excellent.
Thank you, Mark. You have a great day.
We'll post the recording out there, and remind you to go ahead and sign up for next month as well. Actually, you can't yet because I haven't set it up to register yet, but you'll get a notice about it. So, and everybody, stay safe out there. Thanks very much for joining this afternoon. Take care.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Bye all.
Bye.